Cool. Awesome. My next guest on the Lax Goalie Rap podcast. It's Kris Alleyne. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we got a tradition around here where we start out the podcast by telling the story of when you first jumped into goal. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, I've told the story a couple of times. So, classic little brother fashion. I'm sure you've heard it before. My big brother, I kind of followed everything he did, and a couple of his buddies were, in the backyard and needed a shooting dummy. So I kind of hopped in there, and I was back in 2006. So didn't have a goalie stick. I was using the original Edge, the widest head we had, and just hopped in net and hoped for the best. And eventually, kind of stuck with it.
I love it. Yeah, I did one Instagram post and it was like the 3 reasons people become a goalie, and like one of them was like older sibling needs somebody to shoot on. So.
Oh yeah. No, and then once it came to actually, hopping into net with my my youth team, the Clarkstown Patriots, I was in my head. I was playing attack. I had all my arm pads, everything in my bag, and then they, hey, I heard you played goalie a couple of times, messing around. Like, why don't you try it? And then. I had one good practice and kind of got stuck for, the next several years. So it all worked itself out pretty well.
Yeah, there you go. Was it something that like you liked right away, or was it just, he's the goalie, he's pretty good at it. Like he can be our team's goalie. What was it for you?
It was kind of a combination of both. To be honest, it was kind of more so the fact that I got to see the shots that, every goalie wants to see from a young age. My youth team was really, really good. I don't really understand how it kind of worked out the way it did, just based on the fact that a lot of guys ended up playing, college football. One of my good buddies ended up swimming in college. Another one ran track. So no one really stuck with lacrosse after youth, but we didn't lose a lot of games when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old. So I didn't see a lot of shots that I didn't really like. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And when you decided to be a goalie, how did you go about learning the position? You grew up in New York, New Jersey area, so I imagine there's a lot of lacrosse going on, but how did you learn the position?
Yeah, so honestly, at a young age, I lucked out that Bill McGrogan, he played at Albany back in the day. He was a coach in our youth program, and he's been a great mentor of mine over the years. So from the first day I hopped in net, I had a goalie coach, which I understand that a lot of coaches don't, or, a lot of players and programs don't necessarily have that, but I was blessed that from the first time I really stepped into a lacrosse field up until I got to college and in the pros, obviously, I had a focused goalie coach. So I lucked out in that sense, and, being able to go to camps, worked with Brian Doherty when I was a little kid. Dennis Butler was a local guy who he played at Ithaca and was able to learn from him. So I was just, really lucky that where I grew up in Clarkstown, we had a lot of resources for the goalies. So I tried to, as I got older, be that for some of the younger guys coming up.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah. I watched a YouTube series or a series of videos that you did around when the quarantine was first starting. And that was perfect for a youth lacrosse goalies just getting into the position. It's here's the stance, here's here's positioning, here's how we step to the ball. Some of the basics that, when you're an 8 or a 9-year-old goalie, sometimes some of the things that we teach are a little bit, they're a little bit more advanced, and you need that bare bones. Let's keep it super simple. So I love those videos that you did.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what and those type of things were probably some of the things that he taught you right away, right? Just basic stance, positioning in the cage. This is how we're going to move our hand, the save movement. What were some other things that he taught you?
Yeah, I can vividly remember being, in 3rd, 4th grade, and you tell goalies, hey, go walk the line. And that was something that as I got older, I'm like, this is dumb. I don't want to do it. I look stupid. There's no balls coming. But it was the little things like that he focused on that made it kind of, a point of emphasis for us as goalies growing up. So I think, I try to, mimic that when it comes to working with youth goalies. And then as you get older, obviously things are going to get a little bit more fine tuned and focused on, greater details. But I really do think that if you build a foundation, that's going to be able to be, able to break down as you get older. And then once you get to a certain level, obviously me working with college kids now, I think they have the tools, they understand what they need to do. It's just a matter of fine tuning those little things. Cause an area I really believe is that there's no one way to coach the position. It's just everyone learns little bits and pieces, and how much can you put of it together.
Yeah.
So I really do think that just the keeping it simple is really so important, especially for the youth level.
Yeah, there's a couple things in there that really struck a nerve with me. One, like I love, like that's absolutely my philosophy is
Yep.
like there's so many different ways to play the position. And anytime someone comes in and says like you can't do this, it's that's not right. Like for a whole like set of goalies that might be right. Like you can't play in a wide base stance. All right,
Yep.
well if you're a youth goalie and you're pretty short, yeah, you probably shouldn't be playing a wide base stance, but you can't look at a pro like Matt DeLuca and say that he's not having success with a
Exactly.
wide base stance. So like yeah,
Exactly.
huge proponent of there's so many different ways to play this position, and let's find out what works for you. What how would you describe your style of play?
I would definitely say that I like to balance in terms of stance. Like I'm very balanced. The feet really don't move that much. I'll be a little bit wider sometimes, depending on, how the legs are feeling a little bit, and leading up into that game or practice. But I definitely think explosiveness is how you would describe my game over the years.
Yeah.
Being able to kick the feet out. I've broken bones in my feet many of times by, making those kick saves, and then being able to be explosive outside of the net. So picking off passes, picking up ground balls, pushing transition, scored a couple goals in my life. So definitely just trying to be bringing some flair to the game is something I've always kind of, made a point of emphasis for my game.
Yeah, I love when goalies do that, when they bring like that out of the cage level of play, but then also just the energy. I think a lot of defensemen love playing for goalies like that, and I'm sure you probably got some of those comments and from your defensemen like, "Hey, Kris, we love playing for you because you bring that enthusiasm and that energy."
I like to think so.
Yeah, that's right. Well, cool, awesome. And then when you get to, I guess, at what point did you become a full-time goalie? Were you full-time goalie right away,
Day one. Yep, day one.
Wow, interesting. Which is pretty rare, right? Like most times kids are splitting a little bit of time and at least spending some time in the field, but you were right from day one, pure goalie.
Oh yeah. I've hopped and played a couple of positions. I played attack, I played D, messing around, but never really any meaningful minutes at anything but net.
Yeah. What do you love about the goalie position so much?
It's actually almost to a flaw how competitive I am. Whether it's video games or a word search or whatever it is. I like to win, and being that kind of last line of defense, as cliche as that can be, and knowing that I steal 2 shots and we win by 1. That really means something to me. So the competitor in me just likes knowing that if I'm playing well, I'm pissing someone off on the other side because I'm doing my job. So that's just always how I've kind of looked at this position.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. A lot of, it is like you need a mindset shift to be an elite goalie. And that's the mindset that you got to have, is like, I get this opportunity to step up. And a lot of goalies like feel that pressure and they say like, "Hey coach, like what can I do to not feel so, not feel this pressure?" And I say like, you embrace it because like you have this opportunity when your whole team, when the offense loses the ball, middies don't hustle back, you have the opportunity to bail people out because you can make that save. So
absolutely,
let's embrace that, I think. Cool. So then you get to high school and you're still playing. I imagine you're still playing. How did your high school goalie career go?
It was interesting. We definitely had a team of guys with a lot of talent. We just weren't able to put it together for a couple of years, but we played hard, and where we're from in Section 1, I'm from Rockland County. So, Suffolk, North Rockland, Nanuet, Tappan Zee, those are kind of the battles that we went into every season in county. And then we'd get a couple out of conference games and go play across the river and play a John Jay or Yorktown or Lakeland Panis. And those games would always be a little bit tougher for us. But I think in terms of numbers, I had my successes. I won some accolades, and looking back at it, and it's funny enough that majority of the guys that went off to play pretty high level college lacrosse were on the defensive side of the ball. So, Aiden Christian went over to he had a long route, but he went OCC to Bellarmine to Utah. We had Ryan Kennish, who's one of my best friends, who went and played at Oswego, and then James Burke, who's a couple years older than me, that played in Ithaca. And those are, some guys that stick with me that went to play. And we'll joke about it where it's like, yeah, we had a goals against, about 5 or 6, pretty much our entire career together, and we weren't able to win much. So it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I had a blast and wouldn't have changed it any other way, just because we were able to kind of put a stamp on something within our high school program where it was very up and down and we were consistently in the mix. It's just we weren't able to kind of kick through the door.
Interesting. Yeah. When did you start to realize like, hey, I'm pretty good at goalie. I could probably play at the next level. And where did Rutgers come into the mix?
Yeah, honestly, I kind of always had that feeling, again, being a competitor and seeing, other guys around me, whether that was middle school or high school. And obviously the recruiting rules were a little bit different then.
Yeah.
But seeing guys around me hearing the hype, like, oh, well, this kid's the, third-ranked goalie in the area or whatever it was. And I was like, I think I'm better than him. So, the competitor in me was always there. So I think I always kind of knew I'd be able to play in college. It just was a matter of what would be the right situation and where I would kind of get that opportunity. And I guess by, whatever standards you want to look at, I was late in the recruiting process because I didn't commit till the summer going into my senior year, where every other goalie in my area was already committed. But going through the process, I really had no idea where I was going to end up. Was kind of looking at a bunch of different schools and in the process, a couple service academies, and realized that wasn't going to be, the route that I wanted to take. A couple smaller schools in New York, Michigan was a big one that came on late. But it was just really Rutgers it honestly came down to Rutgers and Stony Brook. And at the end of the day, when it came down to it, I didn't necessarily think, being a New York guy, I was like, I don't want to go to Jersey. Like, I'm not crossing the border. And then I go down there, visit, get to meet Coach Brecht, get to meet Coach Cromwell and Fosner at the time, see the facilities. And it was a no-brainer for me, being able to go, play at a Big East school at the time. And then obviously the transition into the Big Ten. So it was, kind of a no-brainer for me and my family, and just being able to, obviously be a part of that program.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you feel when, there's other goalies or even other teammates of yours getting recruited, and here you are going into your, finishing your junior year, and you're not yet in a program? How does that, what does that do to your mind, and how do you kind of overcome that?
I think, and this is a perfect time to kind of, go, I guess, forward ahead to the college coaching stuff, is I don't think it really matters for these kids. And I, obviously in the moment I was frustrated. I thought, hey, I head to head against that kid, I did this and he's going here, whatever it was. But I really don't think that the recruiting process should be as, I guess, cutthroat and stressful for kids. Everyone's going to end up where they belong, and there's going to, be transfer situations or whatever it is, but take the time to really make sure you're doing your homework on a place, because so quickly, we're so hyper focused as, parents, coaches, whatever, hey, our kid needs to go here because this and, whatever. But I think it's just important to make sure that you're doing everything you can so that when the right opportunity arises, where for me, it was playing against what ended up being my college roommate up at UMass during a tournament. I didn't know I was going to get recruited that day, but I knew that I had the skill set and I worked my butt off to put myself in a situation to get recruited. So I really don't think it should be the end all be all is, hey, what are we doing to, make sure that our son is, in ninth grade, by the time he's a junior, he's getting looks at the ACC and the Ivies. Like, let's worry about the fundamentals. Let's worry about being a good teammate. Let's worry about having fun, so that when it comes to, hey, now you're going to play in college, it's not, I'm burnt out because I played 700 games every summer. And that's something that I feel really strongly about, just because the recruiting process has gotten so difficult for so many kids.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's, even in recruiting, but also just in many areas of life, there's like this comparison game too, where you kind of just, you look at like, oh man, this guy's doing that, like, damn. And you start comparing yourself when really the focus needs to be on yourself. And like you said, having fun.
100%.
And yeah. So I think as long as kids can kind of keep that in mind, and, you're always going to see what other kids are doing, because that's just kind of what the it's out there on Instagram, it's out there on Twitter,
100%.
But you got to focus on yourself. So awesome. And then, like you said, you end up where you end up for a reason. Like if you had and ended up at Stony Brook or in Michigan, I'm sure you would have had an amazing experience there. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind.
Yeah. So, you know, you end up where you end up, but you end up going to Rutgers, which is produced some fine goalies. What's going on with the goalie training up there?
It's between Edelman, Kurst coming in, Russo stepping in this past or the year in between, even, Jake Anderson, who's, I don't want to even say my backup because, that's my best friend. And it was never, hey, I'm first, you're second. It was, hey, we're both pretty damn good goalies and whoever's in net is going to do a good job. Coach Breck has a good eye when it comes to recruiting the position and developing it. And obviously there's been some turnover in who's been working with the goalies over the last couple of years. But for me, Coach Fosner, Coach Kent Poser were the two goalie coaches that really, hit home and developed me. And I can't thank them enough. And obviously, both of them being college coaches, I get the chance to kind of, see how they operate and how they think. But I just really think Coach Breck and the entire staff does a pretty good job at the position.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a pleasure watching Kurst this year, man. He
was unreal.
He balled out.
He was unreal.
Yeah,
he was unreal. I shot him a message right after the after the UNC game, and it was more so, hey, keep your head up. I know you don't want to hear that, but that kid was unbelievable. And it's funny enough, down at War at the Shore, had to be 4 or 5 years ago at this point. We're playing in, the A bracket, a bunch of college kids, bunch of, guys who are playing pro, might not be on our roster that week or there. And I see a kid across the field from us in the championship game wearing a Seton Hall prep helmet, no taller than 5'7". And I'm like, who the hell is this kid? He's stopping everyone. They're like, oh yeah, that's the youngest or one of the younger Kirsts. He's going to Lehigh. I was like, he's still in high school. And they're like, oh yeah, he's still in high school. So kid's for real. He's
awesome.
Definitely for real.
Yeah, I love it. When you get to Rutgers, do they, is it about more just kind of fine tuning, your craft, or do they kind of take it to a whole new level in terms of your goalie game? What was the training like for you?
Yeah, I think it was definitely on the field, developing your craft, making sure you're consistent with your movement. So, if you're in your stance, it's not you're higher one day, you're low one day, your hands are here one day, whatever it may be. So it's just about the matter of developing consistency in the cage. Mm-hmm. And then the big thing for us was actually the weight room and being able to be an athlete. So that was something that I struggled with early on was the weight room, the conditioning, because I never had to train at that level throughout high school. It was always just kind of, for lack of a better, phrase, it was just, kind of just relying on God-given talent. Yeah. So I knew I was a little bit faster so I can get outside of the cage. I knew, my hands were a little bit quicker than some of the kids that had seen that were shooting on me. So once I got to school, it was like, yeah, all of us are good goalies, but how are you going to be, durable, being able to be in your stance and for a long time that, you're in a squat for, I don't know the exact number, but a couple minutes a game, you need to be able to not be tired. You go run the ball up the field like I like to play. I can't be gassed if I turn the ball over and then have to go play a possession. So I think it was the development and getting bigger and stronger, which my freshman year I put on probably 15, 20 pounds and was able to, obviously tighten it all up. But, it was definitely the physical point that I struggled with, but I think was a big part of my development.
Yeah, I'm a big weight room guy, and I think that.
Oh yeah.
I love it. I love it because in addition to all that physical stuff you just said, like nothing increases your confidence more than putting on 15 pounds of muscle, right? Like
100%.
You're just walking around with this new attitude, like confidence in life, but also just a confidence in the cage. And this is a mental position. Like when goalies got confidence, they play so much better, and when they don't, like we stink.
100%.
We stink. Have there ever been a point in your career where you kind of like lost the confidence, where you went through a slump?
Yeah, 100%. So, numbers don't lie. My sophomore year, freshman year, I came off a pretty good season, got some accolades, everything. And then sophomore year, I'll just chalk it up now that, they had the film on me, but no, I definitely struggled a little bit sophomore year and started just kind of second guessing myself when it came to, not necessarily do I have the ability, because I knew it was there. It was just, I wasn't making the same saves I was normally making. And then all of a sudden I'm starting to think more. And the second I start getting into my own head and worrying about the next shot more than start worrying about like, oh, well, what if it goes in, or what if I can't stop this run? that started to creep in a little bit, and that negative thought, it derails you. So, sophomore year was in and out of the cage a little bit. I mentioned Jake Anderson before. He did a great job in hopping in. And junior year, had a couple of games where, I wasn't as sharp. Same thing kind of happened. And then senior year rolls around, Max Edelman gets hurt. And I actually thought I was playing, my best ball in a couple of years. And, unfortunately he went down in the Fairfield game, I think it was. And then from there hit the ground running again and didn't look back. So I think that's a kind of, and I don't want to say that like I'm a success story by any means, but I think it's important for guys to realize that, especially as a freshman, you get playing time, it can very quickly get taken from you. And I learned that the hard way, but for me, it was just more so I wasn't playing up to the standard that we needed to win games. And, I understand that. And, it was tough. It was a tough pill to swallow at the time, but obviously I then understood like, hey, I can't sit back and sulk on it. I need to be a better teammate. When it comes to practice, if I'm not in net, come game day, because I'm ultimately going to be a guy that's going to help us win games if I'm making it tough for Scott Bita and Ryan Hollingsworth and Traz and all those guys to score goals. So it's kind of the big picture of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And whoever is the starter, you're pushing them to get better. Right. I mean, that's kind of the thing I talk about all the time is, maybe you're not getting the starts or even the reps with the ones, but if you push everyone to get better, the shooters and the goalies, like your team becomes better and that's your role.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. When you came in as a freshman, 17, 18-year-old kid, goalies are meant to be leaders, right? Like I think goalies, it's a position of leadership, but like you're this young kid, like you've never played college ball before. Like, how do you go about juggling that? Like, how'd you become a leader of that team?
Honestly, it was really tough. I think early on I struggled with that a little bit because, you just kind of take your place as a freshman. You're like, oh, this and that, especially the first couple of weeks of fall ball. And then once I started to kind of, understand how fast the ball is going to move and get scored on a little bit of, a couple of times, and then understand who, tendencies of certain guys. Once I started to kind of get a consistency in practice, I started to kind of feel, hey, I belong here. I have a voice and I need to kind of show that. It definitely helped that, Eddie Bartleson, who, if you ask anyone who knows Rutgers lacrosse, he's one of the faces in terms of the alumni and taking pride in where we went to school. He was a guy I leaned on a lot. He was number 2, I was number 4, so we were right next to each other in the locker room. And he would kind of give me that, confidence of, hey, you're a guy that we think is going to get some playing time for us. Like, kind of talk your junk, bring that energy that we know you can bring. And it meant a lot for me coming from a guy who's a 5th-year senior, a bunch of knee surgeries and, kind of just that grinder on the team to kind of be like, hey, we see it, you kind of bring it a little bit more. And then from there, as I started getting comfortable and then come springtime when I eventually got, named the starter, I kind of felt that I kind of had to forget that I'm a freshman and just do my job. I was, obviously having some success and making some big saves and being able to play, hard in some tough games for us, especially that first year. So I think it was kind of just infectious where if I do what I need to do, then, guys are going to kind of forget how old I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Cause it can get in your head a little bit, like 100%. you start thinking like, hey, I'm a freshman. Like what, all of a sudden you're like, these thoughts of like, I shouldn't be here, or like, this is like, I'm playing beyond what I'm capable of. I'm going to come back to the normal. Those start creeping into your head. And then, I mean, you're not as effective as a goalie. So I love that.
For sure. And I think with that, and this goes for really any position, especially at a younger age, there's definitely a very fine line between cocky and confident in that situation. So nobody likes the freshman coming in, hey, I was all county wherever and all that. No one wants that, but that kid who could come in and, put his head down and work hard, everyone's going to respect that kid. And that's a big thing, I think, where a lot of guys, struggle with, because it's the classic, big fish in a small pond, the whole cycle all over again. So I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah. Fine line between cocky and confident. And, as goalies, as weird as it, we have to toe that line. I feel like you can't be cocky, right? But you need to be like, as confident as you can be without being 100%. Arrogant and cocky. Even if the weird thing is like, even if you haven't earned it,
Yeah.
there's this thing I talk about where it's like, let's say you jump into goal, you have no reason to be confident in your abilities because you haven't put in the work yet. But like the more confident you are, it's this like self-fulfilling cycle where I feel good, I make saves. Oh, now I'm making saves. Like I feel good,
Yeah.
So confidence, confidence,
100%.
confidence. What were some, talking about the mental game and confidence, what were some things that you did or you do to stay mentally tough?
So Wally Bizdell, he works with NHL guys, college hockey teams, college lacrosse teams. He came in my senior year, I believe. And he's a sports psychologist, and the guy, he's worked with Stanley Cup winners, national championship teams. He's excellent at what he does, and that was something that I never really explored, and I think it's become a lot more prevalent now. But the sports psychology it was so super super helpful to me in terms of kind of refining my game senior year. And I think the kind of the breakdown that he gave me, and it's something that's really stuck with me, and I give to goalies that might be going through a slump or anything, is breaking down the position to as simple as you can. So I vividly remember, frustrated with him, wasn't playing well. It might have been right around the time Max had been named the starter my senior year, and I'm, pissed off at the world, whatever. And I'm sitting with him, we're just talking, and he's like, outline the goalie position for me. And I'm like, I stopped the ball. He's like, okay, like more. And I was like, I stopped the ball and I clear the ball. He's like, you're going way too big picture. Like, I was like, you're in your stance. And he's like, what do you do in your stance? I'm like, well, you step to the ball. And he legitimately broke it down to back when I was, a fourth grader learning the game again. And he just kind of like made me really think about it. And he's like, hey, if you're thinking about making a save against Hopkins in the fourth quarter, that you're lost. That you can't think about future things that aren't happening yet if you're not even worrying about the little things that are right in front of you right now. And that's when I kind of, you get hit and you're like, oh, well, all right. And, I'm talking about this 6 years later. So it stuck with me. And then what he did was he had me come up with the basics of my, understanding of what I needed to do. And what that came down to for me was TRR, track, react, refocus. So I had that written down, and I don't have any of my sticks with me right now, but it's on the back lip of every one of my sticks.
Nice.
TRR. And he told me that, and he's like, I had a professional hockey goalie. I won't say names. Very good goalie. And he's like, I had him do the same exact thing as he's on a playoff run, because he started kind of second guessing himself. And I'm like, what? Like, you're gonna tell me that guy needed it too? Like, but no, it was something that really stuck with me. And I've told guys that I've coached too is, have a little, mnemonic device or whatever it is, to kind of slow yourself down in these moments. And another one that he would do is he was like, break the game down into segments. So if you think like, oh, I had a really bad quarter, sure, you might have had a bad quarter, but if you break it down into 5 minutes, so hey, I did really well in these 5 minutes, let me dominate the next 5 minutes and then the next 5 minutes. It's easier than thinking, oh, well, that half didn't go well, or that quarter didn't go well, or this game didn't go well. It's just kind of segment things a little bit. And that, honestly, I couldn't give him more credit than anything, because that really helped save me in the terms of getting out of my own head.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such good. I love sports psychology.
Yeah.
It's something that like, it's something that I never studied at all. I graduated in 2003, and it was like, we were on our own. We were on our own when it came to that. But since then, figure it out. But since then, I've studied it and talked with a bunch of goalies who've worked with sports psychologists. I've worked with a sports psychologist myself, and it's just so fascinating, because when you learn some of those lessons, it's like you just becoming like a better man, a better person that you can use in your normal life. I love it. I love it. So yeah, that lesson of resetting with some sort of mnemonic device, a deep breath, and then also sometimes something physical too, like can help a goalie, like whether that be, checking the pipes or, like giving yourself a little pat on the helmet. So that's a huge for the reset routine, because a lot of times goalies, you get scored on and you go into this automatic like panic mode. You need that reset routine. It sounds like that's, TRR, and write it right there on the lip. I love that. Love that. Oh, cool. When you think about like, other goalies that you looked up to and learned from in your career, like who comes to mind for you?
Yeah. So oddly enough, growing up, Noah Fosner was actually one of my favorite goalies to watch, and then he ended up being my goalie coach freshman year. So I think in terms of like molding my game as a guy who's, 5'9", 5'10", 5'11" on a good day, I'm probably like 5'11" now, but not the point. I definitely molded my game around his and just kind of how, the energy he brought and, multi-time All-American that he was. But then as I got older and being able to play with a couple more guys and get to know some people, John Galloway is someone that I definitely would say is up there for me, just because my rookie year with Rochester, I had gotten picked up and I knew that I was coming in as a mercenary because Jacksonville, they weren't done yet. And I think Blaze had gotten hurt, whatever it was. They needed me to come in and start a game. I knew that's why they picked me up early. And it was kind of just, hey, you're getting one start. And he came to training camp. Oddly enough, funny story about it. I hopped in the net first. I figured I'm starting. It definitely wasn't the right move. Got kicked out of the net pretty quick. But being able to kind of see how he handles his business, and he's been doing this for so long now, and being a head coach of a program and still being so dialed in the PLL right now. That was a guy that immediately comes to mind with in terms of how you need to prepare, how you need to carry yourself, and even if you're not necessarily playing the best that you could in net, that guy demanded everyone's attention and respect anytime he spoke. And that's just kind of, if you've ever met John, that's kind of the person he is. So I definitely think he's someone that I definitely looked up to in the goalie world and the lacrosse world, early on in my pro career and still as a coach now.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It's so great to see him have success. I mean, we're recording this on July 6th. He just got done dominating 2 straight 21 save game. And, oh man, I love it. I love it.
Insane.
Awesome. So that kind of transitioning from Rutgers you mentioned your time in the MLL. How was that for you? Kind of entering the ranks of pro lacrosse.
Yeah, it was interesting. It definitely, trial by fire in that first game. We played the launch down there, and it was awesome. I mean, I think that's the fun part about our sport is that it's such a small, tight knit, culture and everything that you kind of get to know guys. And yeah, there were a bunch of people on that field that I grew up watching play, and all of a sudden I'm on the same field as them and, hanging out after the game, whatever it was. But it was awesome. And I definitely didn't take any of that time for granted. And I obviously the competitor in me, you say it again, I wish I had a little bit more time to get some more playing time over the years. But at the end of the day, in 4 years in the MLL, I was able to play with, at the goalie position, John, Blaze, and Sean Scannell. Mm-hmm. So that's what, 5, I don't know how many John has, but that's in the last couple of years, that's 5 goalie of the years, right there. So I definitely think that it was awesome. And just the amount of guys that I got to get to know over the years, and people from different parts of the country or different programs, or guys you might have butt heads with playing in college that all of a sudden are your buddies. It was awesome. I loved my time.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Congrats. I mean, being a goalie at the highest level, it's like, I mean, it's not even top 1%. I mean, there's so few professional lacrosse goalies. It's like top, 0.01%. So that's amazing that you're able to play at that level.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and then so that could, I guess after the, are you officially retired, by the way, or are you still working?
I'm not. Talked to a couple teams prior to the draft, and it's just kind of staying ready, seeing what happens. But with the way recruiting is and coaching, I can't imagine that after this year, if nothing comes up, then it probably would be the end. But I'm keeping the options open, kind of seeing what happens. But definitely can see myself, kind of pivoting more into the coaching, which obviously I'm doing full time. So that's kind of just where things are as of right now.
Makes sense. I want to talk about the coaching. So, I think before we hit record, I mentioned you coached for Team Puerto Rico. How did that come about?
Yeah. So that was actually my first, real, I guess, coaching job. So I'd coach club ball. I'd coach, helping out at my high school with stuff with, working with the goalies, whatever it may be. But I was working in Manhattan, didn't necessarily love what I was doing. Jeff Ramos, whose son was a goalie himself at Albany, Will Ramos. And he had mentioned, hey, I'm coaching the Puerto Rican national team. I know you had, said you were looking to leave your job and want to get into coaching. Why not come with us to Israel, help with the goalies, run the box, get some experience and kind of see where it goes. And oddly enough, in the interview process and reaching out to a couple of schools, and I was kind of like, hey, I played the position, would love to help out and whatever it may be. I'm working with Puerto Rico. Yeah, I don't really have much experience. Someone please take a chance on me type thing. And oddly enough, Mark Miyashita, who's my first boss at Canisius, was coaching for Team Canada. And, we had met beforehand. We fly out to Israel and my second round interview. And ultimately, the job offer came in my hotel in Israel. So it kind of just all came full circle. But yeah, coaching with Team Puerto Rico was awesome. We did our training camp right locally at my rival high school at Nyack. So it was a bunch of local guys and then, other guys of Puerto Rican descent, who I had known over the years and guys who I'd gotten to know. But it was an unbelievable experience just because my first, I guess, big stage lacrosse was at the international level. So, I had a blast with it. We did really, really well in that tournament and getting a chance to, play against the Iroquois, play against, Germany, Japan, Team Israel. Like it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing experience. Yeah, just competing at that international level and just so much, you're playing for country. So it's like got this, I don't know. I feel I've never done it before myself, but I feel like it's got, this level of significance that you wouldn't get at like a college, or a high school level program.
It's definitely different. And I think the coolest part for us and Kevin Lewis, who's one of our attackmen, and he was actually, oddly enough, one of the few that was fluent in Spanish on the team. But he had gotten I don't remember if it was a text or whatever it was from one of his family members, and was like, "Hey, they're playing the game in like the town square back in Puerto Rico."
Wow.
So like one of our games was broadcasted, and that was the thing for us where it was like, "Holy crap! Like this is obviously bigger than us. Is they're actually watching us back home." So that was awesome experience for us.
Yeah, totally. It's like, it's like you never know who you're impacting, and like someone could watch that game, and that's the reason they want to play lacrosse, right? Or someone could see you, Kris, in goal for Rutgers or for the Rattlers, and be like, oh man, that's the guy. Like I love the way that guy plays. That's the way I want to be a goalie because of that. So you always got to keep that in mind. You're a role model to somebody out there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Awesome. So then you're now doing a lot of coaching, now assisting with the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yes, sir. Defensive coordinator there. So got hired in October. So it's still with COVID and everything. It's been, kind of a sprint, but I'm finally settled in, got my feet under me, but it's been awesome so far.
Cool. Well, I wish you luck with that. If there's a young goalie out there that, let's say they're like a freshman or sophomore in high school and they want to play, collegiate lacrosse, you as a coach, like what, advice would you give to that goalie?
I think obviously, stop the ball would be, big, but no, I think the big thing for that is making sure that you're doing the little things when it comes to, going to these showcases or, playing. Let me backtrack. Before you start worrying about coaches being there, making sure that you're handling your business. And that's kind of what I touched on earlier. But I think for some of these kids, and you send us highlight tapes or, you send us game film, whatever it is. And no goalie or faceoff guy's ever been scored on or lost the faceoff. And that's kind of, as coaches, like, I would love to see goalies get scored on. Like, I want to see full game tape because I want to see, hey, is this kid all of a sudden pointing fingers and yelling at his defenseman, or is he smashing a stick on the pipes or, beating himself up, whatever it is. I think for guys is to be able to kind of slow the game down and being able to be like, hey, I made a bunch of saves. Yeah, I cleared the ball well, but I also was the best communicator on the field. One of my defensemen tripped and fell and I got scored on. Am I making sure to go pick him up and, hey, you're good, we'll get the next one. Like that kind of stuff matters to me more because it's going to be pretty clear when you see a goalie if they've got the potential or, kind of that fire to play at the next level. I think that's pretty obvious to, anyone's eye. But then if all of a sudden they're able to do the little things and kind of have those intangibles, I think that's so, so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I heard like a recruiting tip. It's like the number one way to get recruited is to be a great goalie. It's kind of like what you're saying at the very beginning of
Yep.
like, all right,
Yep.
well, just work on your game before you kind of start reaching out to these coaches and be a great goalie. And then let's do all the little things, right? Do all the little things
100%.
right. And love it. Love it. When you're working with goalies and you're also now like the director of Goalie Factory, doing lacrosse specific training. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. And how'd that come about? And like, where can people find out that info?
Yeah. So obviously it's under the Faceoff Factory umbrella. So Joe Nardella is one of my best friends, from our time at Rutgers and obviously beyond. So kind of just, hey, help out with the goalie side of things, and then kind of worked itself out there. So just definitely staying super busy. And unfortunately with now being able to recruit again and with COVID, I don't want to say over, but being able to get out and open things up a little bit. I'm looking to get back into the goalie stuff a little bit more. Just I'm really focused on our NJIT stuff right now, but that's a big point of emphasis, is being able to kind of get back on the road and coach some goalie stuff as well. But yeah, it's been awesome. Definitely put on a couple different hats and doing some different stuff, but I enjoy it.
Cool. When you train goalies, are there, or when you trained yourself for that matter, are there specific drills that you really love?
I kind of break it down into different areas of the game. Like I'm a firm believer in less is more when it comes to goalie training. And what I mean by that is that, any goalie that I've coached or, worked with at a, showcase or whatever has heard me say this line, but if you're seeing, 100 shots in a game, we have a bigger problem. Like that's the one time you're allowed to go fight your defense. Something's going really wrong there. So I'm not a firm believer in, hey, I'm going to go get some reps. Let me go get 3 of my buddies who play attack. You guys shoot as hard as you can for 2 hours on me. I don't think it's not bad, but it's just not productive at a certain level. So for me, I'm a big believer in short burst reps. So when it comes to, your warm up, like let's get 5 shots high and then get the next guy in, just kind of keep it more game realistic. So you're seeing shots in spurts as opposed to 100 in a row. And then on top of that, I like to focus on just like small part before we start getting into the live reps. So we'll go through our hand speed stuff. So, ball toss, 2 balls at once, juggling, whatever that may be. Footwork stuff. We'll hop on the ladder, jump rope, ski hops, different footwork stuff that we like to do. And then on top of that, then we'll pick up a stick. We'll go with a shorty. We'll go with just the shaft. We'll go with a stick with no mesh in it, whatever it may be. It's just kind of break it down into smaller things so that it's not just a million shots. And by the time you're done, you're like, holy crap, I'm exhausted. And, I don't want to see shots for the rest of the week. So I really do think it's focusing on little things and then getting into the big picture of seeing some live reps at the end.
Love it. Yeah, love it. If you could go back and give kind of your high school, maybe your college self some advice, knowing everything you know now, what would that be?
Definitely don't take it for granted. It's cliche, and I'm sure, everyone said that before, but, it all goes by pretty quick. And just as quickly, for me, as I mentioned with, up and down a little bit, the middle part of my career in college, I had some success and very quickly it was taken away. And that could have been from injury or, whatever it may be. So I really can't stress it enough, especially with kind of the nature of the recruiting process and, everyone wanting to be rated on Inside Lacrosse or whatever it may be. Is just have fun with this game. Cause it's, they call it the medicine game for a reason. And I love this sport. And, I work it in the business side of it. So I can't necessarily put too much of a, negative on it, but I do think that there is a negative when, kids forget why they're playing. And, I had a coach years and years ago tell me, play and love the game like you did when you were a kid. And that's really what I stress in when it comes to my guys. Cause the second you start making this a job, it's not fun. that's not why we play the sport. That's not why you play any sport, is to all of a sudden be like, hey, this needs to be so regimented. Obviously you want to have focus, you want to have, a regiment, but you don't want it to be, the stress caused by the fact that, oh, I have to go play lacrosse now. It should
Right.
never be like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more us goalies can have fun, like the better we're going to be.
100%.
Because as soon as you're not having fun, like you get all tense and you get all tight, and that's not how you can react to the ball. But when you're fun, you're playing loose, you're out, maybe just in the backyard with dad, you tend to be a lot looser, or your brother, you tend to be a lot looser and you play a lot better. So we got to replicate that even under the spotlight. 100%. Right. And that's, that's the challenge, 100%. But that's what the elite goalies can do.
100%.
Love it. Love it. Well, mostly on this podcast, I just stick to lacrosse, but I wanted to ask you a question, because you're a Black athlete, and we're in a sport that is predominantly white. I guess my question to you is, what do you think we can do to get more Black, Latino, more diversity into this sport?
Yeah, I think the big thing with that is obviously the past year and a half now, it's been heavy. Between our sport, even still seeing stuff on Twitter, an event popped up yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it was, seeing on Twitter. But I think, education is everything. I mean, if you don't put yourself in an experience with, a Black athlete, or, a Black person putting themselves in experiences with other white people, or, getting to know other people's cultures, or anything, ignorance is, it's going to happen, unfortunately, but it's not an excuse of like, oh, I didn't know that. There's a multitude of reasons to learn about other people's cultures and understanding things. Like, this is going to sound so ridiculous, but it's fresh in my mind. Have you seen the movie Midsummer? It's like a horror flick kind of. I watched it the other day. And it's, a commune in Sweden. It's a bizarre movie. I recommend it to anyone if you've got, a couple hours, but in part of it, they would bury their dead, and they would burn the bodies and put the ashes next to this tree. And one of the characters in it ended up urinating on that tree, and everyone freaked out. He didn't know that. And that was a culture that's very, very secluded. So yeah, it's obviously, inexcusable that he did that, but he didn't know that. Like, that is one example where it's like, okay, I can kind of understand that, that's not a documented or well-documented culture. But when it comes to, understanding Black athletes, as they're literally telling you things that are happening, and people are like, well, this happened here, and what about the violence in Chicago? And like that's where it's an issue to me, is that like there is a multitude of outlets for you to learn about, but people are just like very quick not to. And that's on both sides. And being able to understand why people operate the way they do, why people's cultures do things the way they do. I mean, you mentioned it yourself. You're living in Argentina, and there's things I'm sure you're learning about yourself, being an American down there. So I think for us as a sport, us as a culture, us as just people, is maybe like take that step back and just listen, understand that why things happen the way they do. I know from experience, like I've had things said to me. I've had things, kind of assumed about me just based on the way I look. And, I'm a Black guy with tattoos, you eventually assume that, I might not be who I am. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, he has lacrosse stuff on. None of this makes sense to me because of what I know in my own life. So I think, moving forward is just being able to educate ourselves in any way we can, and just listen. Like people, there's obviously going to be, extreme examples on both sides, but and that's not even just Black, white, that's just in general. But being able to take the second to be like, if they're saying this and feel this way, why do they feel this way? Like it's something that I feel really strongly about. And, I've had these conversations, and, unfortunately, had some tough conversations with close friends or whatever it may be. But I really do think it's something that's so important that, it might sound ridiculous to you, or you might not understand how people go about whatever it may be. But if that's a way someone wants to be treated, like treat them that way. Like it's really simple.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's great.
No,
I mean,
100%.
It's kind of what that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is like interview people from all different, angles, and understand not only the way they think about like the sport, but just, where they're coming from and what lacrosse means to them. So thank you for coming on, and, you know, thank you for being a pioneer. I mean, there's, you know, not that many Black athletes in lacrosse. I mean, I could probably count on one hand the number of Black goalies, right? I mean, there's just not, you know, there's not that many. And so thank you for being a pioneer, because, you know, the pioneers take a little bit of crap, but you make it easier for the people that, you know, that come next. So that's awesome. That's
the goal. Always doing it. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than us.
That's right. That's right. And it is the medicine game. So, you know, even if, you know, there's kids out there that don't look like their teammates, just know that, like, there's a place in this sport for everybody. I don't know if have you heard the Onondaga story about the winged animals versus the land animals?
Oh yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. I was just editing a podcast with Warren Hill, and he told the story. Anyway, long story short, there's this animal that doesn't look like the others, the bat, right? And then at night, like, they're playing this lacrosse game, and then at night, all the other animals can't see, and the bat then excels. So it's like, even though you look different than everyone else, everyone's got their talents. Kris, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story. That was really awesome. Where can people learn a little bit more about what you got going on?
My social, so K Alleyne, ALLEYNE _ both on Twitter and Instagram, and then at Goalie Factory on Instagram is where a lot of the drills and stuff will be popping up. So, and then obviously NJIT Lacrosse, you know, follow us, Roll Tech, and yeah, looking forward to it. I appreciate you having me.
Love it. Roll Tech. Cool. I'll link up to that when this comes out. If you had to leave the goalies out there with one last piece of advice, what would that be?
Oof. Enjoy it. Have fun with this game. You know, our position's really tough when it comes to, you know, it's very cut and dry. You're either making saves or you're not, but understand that they're the bigger picture. And, you know, you might not need to make every save, but you might need to make one to save a game for your team, or, you know, save your season. So just always think about the big picture.
Love it. Kris, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cool. That was great. I'll let you know when it comes out.
Awesome. Looking forward to it, man. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was great. Loved it. Cool. Well, I'm going to do that goalie summit again in September. So I'll reach out and see if you're interested, if the timing's right.
Yeah,
if not,
that'd be awesome.
If not, no worries. But
no, that'd
cool,
be awesome.
Nice to meet you, and have a great
be
day.
Good.
Yeah, we'll see you.
You as well.